today we're going to be covering the Financial Edge project record or the fund record, depending on how it's named in your system. And then the second item is going to be the budgeting. Okay, and then again, I'll go through some of these items, and then I'll leave some time for for any questions towards the end. But again, I invite questions during, so I would love for this to be a conversation where we can talk about stuff like that. That's what I really see this as being, in terms of a platform where people can ask questions. And I know what it's like in terms of contacting Blackbaud, and sometimes having an issue with something that may not necessarily be Financial Edge related, but it is related to your general ledger. But there might be something beyond that might be accounting related. Okay, so that being said, I will just go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to just ask for just for someone to just say that you can see my screen, and maybe a thumbs up. Winky, Erica, thank you. All right, I appreciate that. All right, so if I know some of you have been on the earlier, the one that I had 2 weeks ago. Again, this is going to be a series that's going to run through June, and then we're going to take the summer off, and then we're going to do another series in the fall. And this is new for me too, so I'd like to take whatever format that we can take, so that you can get as much out of it as you can. I was thinking earlier, maybe we can have some working sessions. So if there is someone that wants to build a visual chart organizer, let's say, for your organization, and you don't mind using that as an example, we can go through that. Or if you want to know how to import a budget, that could be something that we can do together, so that you can see those kinds of things. And I'd be glad to help and give you the support that you need. Okay. All right. So that being said, I've got a slide up here, and again, this is just giving you a little bit of background for the people who have not seen me before. I'm based here in Fort Lauderdale. I've got over 15 years experience of software implementation with Blackbaud in the consulting field. I've also converted many clients from other, an array of other clients. So I'm aware of other solutions, but I always like to say a general ledger is a general ledger. There are going to be some nuances, different bells and whistles, but ultimately we needed to do a certain thing, right? And that is to be able to run reports and give our board members and finance committees and our grant makers, all those people need to see reports. And so this is where I want to help you make sure that you're using the system to full capacity. Okay. And so that's all for me. And again, I'm leaving the same slide up, which were really the 10 top issues that I've always seen over the years: reconciliation, reporting, bank recs, grant reporting is not set up correctly. And these are some of the top 5 things I say. If you're not doing them in Financial Edge, you're using a lot of your time that could, and also inviting errors, right? There's always risk of opportunity for error if you're doing something in Excel. So we want to just mitigate some of those risks, so that you can feel comfortable that when you're running a report, that it is correct, right? And people can see you've got transparency of all those information, all those items that are there, and that's really what I want to help you with. And then of course the last few are allocations and distributions. I know that a lot of organizations do those in Excel, or may not even be aware that you can do that. Like if you have multiple grants and you want to distribute, for example, some of your expenses over multiple grants and do that via percentage or via an allocation, those are some of the things that I can help you. The biggest one is always the REFE integrated. If you have Raiser's Edge and you're not integrated with Financial Edge, that is something I know it's an issue with many organizations, and it's not just the two softwares do speak to one another, but what I find is always that the development department and the finance department doesn't always communicate properly, so that there's really only one point of entry. When a gift comes in, it goes into Raiser's Edge, and then it needs to come over into the general ledger to be reconciled in the bank rec. So it is a whole step process, and if it works and we've had it set up correctly and we've mapped it correctly, I'm telling you, it's like those are one of the things where you can feel so much better, because you're not spending time at the end of a given period, month, or quarter thinking about if something reconciles and why doesn't it reconcile to your your subsidiary ledger in this case. Okay, and then finally, your chart of accounts design was done so many years ago, and a lot of times people don't have time to train, and I feel that I get a lot of that from people because they understand the general ledger, but when someone's training you, they'll train you just on the items that they need to teach you to get your job done. But Financial Edge has so many other bells and whistles that if you don't spend the time or make the investment in the beginning, you're going to lose out on a lot of those capabilities. Okay, and then finally the staff turnover. Okay, so I'm going to just pause right there and just ask: are there any burning questions or anything that you want to see outside of what I'm going to show you with the project record or the budgeting? Okay, all right. We're good. Remember, just unmute yourself if you have a question, or just write it in the chat, and my colleague Casey will pop in and let me know. All right. So I'm gonna just go ahead and so this is the overview. I'm gonna just minimize the PowerPoint, and I want to just also make sure. Can y'all see Financial Edge NXT, or are you still looking at? Nope. Okay. All right. I am gonna stop sharing, and I will share again. And this time I will share the correct. Okay. All right. Can you see Financial Edge NXT now? Yay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So what I wanted to spend time on today is there's a concept in Financial Edge that's called the project record. And don't get hung up on the naming of that, because you might have inherited a system that renamed that field into what's called a fund, which is, I think, more accommodating. When we think of a project, or we think of a community foundation, these are funds, right? These are funds. They could be called programs. They could be called whatever. I've seen them just quite a few iterations of it, but really the way that I want to explain it to people when I see them is that the project record allows you to take an item outside of your chart of accounts. So when we think of your chart of accounts, and I'll just go ahead and just go into my general ledger, into accounts, and I'm in a sample database here, and just show you that in this particular case, when I go into the available accounts that are already set up in this particular general ledger database, you can see here that we have 3 segments, right? There's that first segment, there's a second segment, and the third segment. And in Financial Edge, you have the ability to have up to 10 segments. But I will say this: in all the years that I've worked with many clients, I've never seen more than 5. Because yes, the opportunity is there, but what I always do if I'm working with you and helping you think of designing your chart of accounts is helping you think through the things that, what do I need to track? And if you were a new client, for example, you'd be asking, well, these are the things that I'm looking to track. Of course, I'm trying to track supplies. I may want to track departments. I need to track the restriction, right? Because that's a GAAP rule, right? Whether something's temporary, or in this case, either unrestricted or restricted. And so in Financial Edge, these 2 segments, the first 2 are required segments. The first one is that restriction that I just mentioned, which now GAAP only requires 2, which are, again, the unrestricted and then restricted. But I also help people set up other ones. You might want to set up and again, now, see, this is where it gets confusing. Financial Edge calls that segment a fund. And so just not to confuse anyone, because that's not the project, but this fund, which what I like to call as the restriction, can also be things like your capital campaign. So if your organization is embarking on a capital campaign, we might want to set up another restriction where we can say that O1 is unrestricted, O2 would be restricted, and then O3 could be this capital campaign. O4 could be board designated. Or if you still want to look at temporarily restricted, you can do things like that. The idea is that you have the ability to create these again, restrictions. I'll call them restrictions and not funds, because so that when you run a report, you can see, and for your audit, you can see, hey, these are all my unrestricted items, and even though my capital is something that I'm restricting to a specific cause, if you will, it's internally restricted, but from a GAAP perspective, it's still considered unrestricted. So those are things that you can talk about with me or with your auditor, depending on how you want to report on them on your audit. Okay. Then we've got the next segment, which is in this case, what we would call the account code. And that generally is a standard term. I've also seen it called the general ledger code. And we think of those as your cash account, your net asset accounts payable, your office supplies, salaries, repairs and maintenance, all those general topics, right? Those general categories, if you will. And the combination of those segments make up a story, if you will, a complete story. In this case, we're looking at the third segment, which I believe it's called either department or cost center, and we can name them any way that you want. So again, don't get caught up on the naming, because a lot of the stuff can be renamed to make it easier for people to think about. So you have the idea there that in this case, what this is saying, that 01 in this case means unrestricted. The 1000 might just mean in this case the operating cash account, and then the 00 could be the default, right? Because we need a default. But 01 might be the finance, 02 might be marketing, 03 might be development, or whatever. The choice is yours, depending on how it is that you want to split your detail, right? How do you want to report on it? Okay, and by the way, that is something that we always look at, is from like an ending perspective, like what is it that you want the system to give you? And then we work backwards on okay, let's do this. Since you're looking for this, then we need to make sure that we add this to the segments. Okay, so then now you can think about this, that if we were to create another segment in here, think about the combinations, right? We're going to have a huge chart of accounts, right? Because you have all these combinations, like, there could be an 01 1000 and 00, an 01 1000 into 01, 02, 03, but you may not need them. There might not be anything required for that, like especially in the balance sheet. You might not be tracking cost center in a balance sheet item. So all your balance sheet items might be 00. But I've seen organizations where they do want this segment to track balance sheet activity. And if you want to do that, you can do that. The idea of what I'm trying to say here is that this is going to be your central chart of accounts. And then what sits outside of that, which is coming into what my topic is this other segment that we call project. Okay. And so now notice here, now this is just the account. We don't see anything here about a project. And where I'm going to go here now is I'm going to go into just a journal entry. And I'm going to open up just a journal entry that's random, just so that you can see the available columns. Okay, and we'll just view this. And I'm not concerned about, there are no results here, but that's okay. I really just want to see the columns. So we had that account number that we just saw, which would be that 01-1000. We've got post date, encumbrance. That's just, we'll cover that on another session. Journal reference, debit, credit. And then here, let's move this over. We'll see what's called this project segment, right? This is the one that I'm talking about. And because this sits outside of that account number, you only have to use the account numbers that are associated with this particular program or project or fund, okay? And what Blackbaud has done with this is that the reason why it's out there is one of the main reasons is that it does stay out of your chart of accounts. So your chart of accounts doesn't blow up to thousands of numbers. You can minimize it and it's more manageable. With this project segment, not only does it outside of that, but it also, there's a whole bunch of reporting that's available just for this project segment alone. And so they've created that, it's available in there, and it's a shame not to use it, because you could potentially just put this project as part of your segments in your chart of accounts. And I've seen that happen where people insist that they don't want to use that and they want to use it that way. That's fine. You can do that. But then you're just missing out on all the available bells and whistles that were created for this particular segment. Okay. And while I'm here, I'll just continue going forward, because I just want to say that, many of you may not be aware of, you might have heard the concept of transaction codes, and we'll cover them in a future webinar. You can see here that there are some additional columns here, right? And Each column, don't get caught up on the naming of them, because these are also additional opportunities for you to record information. So if there are things like, for example, the one that I like to use as an example most is whether something's spendable or not spendable, meaning that it might be a grant, and this is something that you want to get reimbursed. If you have a reimbursement grant, we can have a question here where it might say, you know what, while I talk, I'm just gonna go to another one where there's some data in there, just so that I can open it. What'll happen here is it's an additional opportunity. Okay, so the value here is whether or not it's spendable or not spendable. So in this case, you can have that, whether or not it's a jurisdiction. You can say whether if there is one or there isn't, if it's an appeal code or if it's a grant. You can see, of course, these don't have any data. Okay, you can put the grant in here so that you can see which item, which grant this particular line goes into. And these transaction codes are a drop-down menu that allow you to pick from a list of things. So again, going back to my conversation earlier, if I'm asking you, what is it that you're trying to track? What are you doing in Excel right now that we should be doing in Financial Edge? So that you don't have to go in Excel. So that when you want to run a report, you can run a report on any one of these filters. Okay, so that's what makes it really useful, because it's and again, it's about sharing information to program directors, other people who are non-accountants. The idea is that we could use these filters for things that they need, right? So they don't have to see anything else like accounts payable or even journal entries. We could just show them the reporting on a particular filter that's set to their specific grants that they are monitoring, okay, that they have responsibility for. Okay. Again, we'll spend more time on that on a future session. I wanted to show you where the project segment lands. And now I will go back into projects just to show you some of the things that I used to use when I was in your shoes. I had lots of grants that my organization had 99, almost 0.9% government funding. So I mean, if you have a few grants, you know the headaches it could be, right? There, not only do they have different fiscal years, but they're all specific to certain accounts. You can't charge food to this one, you can't charge travel to that one. All those things are restrictions that the headache that for me before I had Financial Edge was that I would, had a team of accounts payable people who would, on a monthly basis keep entering their chart of, the charges and, invoices and things like that. And then come to find out that, I've missed something. And now it's reporting time for that particular grant. And I run a report only to find out that there was food charged to this grant. There was travel charged to this grant. And now I have to go back 6 months and do a journal entry, right, to adjust that particular item. And that's a headache in itself because it's in the past. Where am I going to put it now? That's the other issue. Do I put it into another grant? So there's always these things like that can cause issues. And the way that I got around that once I got Financial Edge is this project record. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this add a new project as if I was adding a new one. And by the way, the project ID, again, what I like about this is that, if you notice in the background, these are all labeled as 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on and so forth. We don't have to get caught up in the naming of them. You have up to 12 characters here to come up with an ID, and it could be numerical or alpha. It's up to you. I always like to think about the people who actually do the inputting of transactions. I'm an accountant. I used to be an accounts payable clerk. I know what it's like, having a 10 key versus having to, if I'm doing a journal entry and I'm typing all numbers because I know all the numbers because after a while I'll know them. But then I get to the project segment and I have to, move my hands and type the word annual budget or annual fund or whatever. So I want to make it easier. Okay, and that's my recommendation is always, let's use the numbering. There are other ways for us to get that information if you wanted to categorize it a certain way. As I go through this, you'll see the different fields. But the options are there, and if people are used to those names, we can do that. It's not a problem. You've got up to 12 characters to do that, and you don't have to be consistent. just like in the account codes where we saw O1 and 1000-00, you're limited to what we create at that point when we create it, even though we can expand it in the future. Like, for example, in that department segment, for example, we only had 2 characters. If it happened that we had more than 99 departments, we can easily increase that number to a third, to include a third digit, and start using that moving forward. So that's easy enough to do. Financial Edge allows you to do that, not a problem. Okay, so you've got your ID here, you've got your description. This is where the type comes in handy. Now, all of these fields here are just mechanisms that allow you to use the reporting, if you will, on a basis of, for example, like I'll show you here. So, and again, this is a long list because people have been playing in my sample database. You may only have a few, but the idea is that, all your grants are going to be in here. So if you wanted to run a report on grants, I'll show you in a moment in the where is it? In the reporting, where I could use that as a filter, and then I could run a report on all of my grants or all of my endowments or all of my events, right? This project segment can also be used to track events. So if you're going to have an annual event and you want to see the expenses that are related to that, we can create a project to track any item that's related to that event. And then at the end of the period, quarter, whatever, you can run a report on all of your events and see all the revenue that came in for it. And you can also see all the expenses. So you can see, did I make money on it? Did I lose? You can see those kinds of things. And I can't tell you how many times people have done this, because sometimes the nonprofits aren't generally focused on profit and loss. They're just focusing on doing good, and that's awesome. But we do need to see where the money's going, and we need to make sure that it's not being wasted. And this is a great way to make sure that we are using the money the way it's intended, and saving where we can, not duplicating efforts. Those are the things that I think that take the CFO role into the next level of being able to tell people, to tell your CEO, tell the board, okay, well, these are the numbers, but this is what they mean. This is what this means. We've lost money. How many people have we helped? Is it worth to do this program again? Are we getting enough out of it? Should we be doing something else? And those are the things that I think that take organization to another level, because you're not just doing the same thing all the time. You're trying to do good. You're trying to change the world. This is a tool that can help you do that. At least look at the tools that show you how you've gotten there. Okay, so you've got this opportunity to do the type. Status, of course, that's pretty straightforward, but this is a great way for you to manage things like, if you have a grant that you applied for and you want to start putting it into your budget, which we'll talk about next. So let's say that you've applied for 6 grants and you want to show, you want to do a budget for next year, and you want to do it where you want to say, what, we applied for 3 grants and I want to include all my projects or grants or funds that are in pending status, so that I can show my board a complete picture if all these grants came in. Okay, and then I'll show you in the budgeting module, you can have different scenarios. You can have a scenario where 2 of the grants, there's a high probability of these 2 grants that are going to be accepted. Then you can do one with, a lower probability, and this is what it will look like. So now you can think ahead. Do we need to hire people? Do we need to fire people? How does that work? Like this will give you that opportunity to say, okay, you know what, we're losing a grant. So let me put that into my future budget. If we don't know if we're going to get this one renewed, well, let's have a scenario out there to say, what happens if we don't get this grant renewed? And that happened to me all the time. There was every year we were losing grants, every year we're gaining grants, and it's hard to manage to do a budget when you have all these variables. And Financial Edge allows you to do that. We'll get into that when we go into budgeting. Okay, so you've got these statuses that you could also run reports on. You've got your start and end dates. Those are really just categories for you to match information. Again, additional reporting categories if you want to use these. Really, the thing that I love the best, and this is kind of what really cured my headaches, if you will, with that issue that I mentioned earlier about people putting stuff into incorrect accounts, or I'm sorry, charging things that were not appropriate for a specific grant. So you've got this thing here, which is called account restrictions. And so if this was a particular grant that I might say, you know what, well, right now it's always set up to allow with all accounts, because that's the assuming that you're going to allow it all. But what if I said, you know what, I want to restrict it? And so now I want to restrict it from certain accounts. I can either say a range of accounts, or I can say selected of accounts, or a query of accounts. Okay. A query, if you're not familiar with query, we will go over that. I've noticed that Financial Edge users don't normally use that. But however, I do want to spend some time on it because I think there might be some, some uses for people who just don't even know why it's there. Okay. But if I just chose selected accounts, I could potentially just start typing in supplies, and I can say supplies. I can do this manually and, just keep on adding more and more accounts. Like, so again, let's say I don't want to be able to charge supplies. I can just, with that query function, I can limit this and say, I don't want, notice that this one is, 01, right? 5200, which is office supplies. And then 01 is administration. 02 is development. But let's just say with that query, I am able to just say, I want you to, restrict all the 5200 accounts. So I can go in there and type them manually, or I can do that query, or I can do that range of accounts, so that when someone is doing accounts payable and they just got a bill from Staples, they're not going to go in there, immediately and incorrectly charge it. And if they did, and this restriction is on, it'll tell them you are not allowed to do this. And it'll stop them right there. And at that point, they can either go back to the CFO, whoever, and say, okay, this one's not allowed. Can I have another coding? Can this go to another grant? Which one should it go to? And it stops you there. And I think for me, that's where the savings is, right? Because if I know throughout the year, everything's being charged appropriately, I don't have to worry about at the end of the year when I'm doing my report that there's going to be stuff there that doesn't belong there. Okay. So this is kind of really what I want to really drill into the theme today, is that to think about this. It does take a little bit longer, but I say let's make that part of the process of when we create programs and grants or whatever we're creating. When you have a grant, you have a budget that's related to that grant. Well, why don't we put that budget in here and also restrict the other accounts so that there's no issue that anything like that could ever happen? Okay, really cool tool. It does save you time in the end, I promise you, if you use it this way. Okay. All right, I'll keep going down. Not much else here. If you want to add contacts here, I like this piece here. There's also, if you want to add custom fields there. I mean, if you're familiar with Financial Edge 7 and you might be using, it was just renamed in Financial Edge NXT. It used to be called attributes, and now it's called custom fields. And again, these could be things like if you wanted to track who the grant manager is. And with this particular, if I go ahead and chose the grant manager, then I can say, the value could be the person's name, right? And I can put comments here. And now when I do a report, I can say, give me all Ron Carter's budgets or events that he's monitoring or whatever. You can run a report. That's what's great about these custom fields. You can make them mandatory or optional. It's up to you. And there are different like notice that this one was a drop down menu, but you could also have one that just says yes or no, or you can have a date, or you can just, there are 5 different categories that you could use. You could also have like an open table where it just gives you notes and you can just write things. So, and there are benefits and disadvantages with each one that you use. I can help you think through that if you need to. Okay. And then finally, the piece here, if you're not using this, I urge you, I know Financial Edge NXT might be new for some of you, and you might have it, but you're using FE7 version. You don't have the ability in FE7 to attach a contract. And again, this is available here, and it's available throughout the system in NXT, where if this was a particular grant, or if there was a contract related to this, or anything that I want people to see when they come in here, you can go ahead and scan them, and then you can either drag or you can click to browse to a local file, attach it. It stays into the folder in the system, and then people can access it from wherever they are. And you know, the biggest advantage that I liked about this was that if you do this, you know, inevitably when you have an audit, your auditor's always going to ask, can I see the contracts? Can I see the grant that you wrote? Or, you know, all that in documentation, they can just come in here. You can give them view only licenses and they can't break anything. They can just view things. They can come in here and think about the amount of questions so that, you know, when I was audited, man, they used to stay in my office for 5 to 7 days, you know, doing field work, right? Just keep on asking me questions. Where's this invoice? Can you pull this? Can you pull that? Show me support for this. Show me support for that. Show me the contract. All of these things are things that we can embed into the record, and it stays there, and people can download it locally. If the auditors want to have it for their files, they can do that. They can look at it, they can read it, and then really just narrow down the questions so that when they're doing field work, it's down to 1 day because they've already gotten the answers and they only have questions on the few things that maybe they need additional information on. Okay, so really cool tool. This also works in the accounts payable. So I would urge you to use that for your invoices. So again, so that we can just kind of get rid of our paper, right? We can have that all paperless in the system available for anybody to see. Okay, all right, I'm gonna pause here and just ask if anyone has any questions on this before I go to budgeting.
I have a question. So we just transitioned to Financial Edge in October, and our implementation consultant recommended using the project field as our cost center. So that's what we're using it for. We only have 2 account code segments. We have the restriction, and then we have, you know, the main segment if it's an expense or whatever, and then we use project, and then we have a transaction code for grant. Okay. What we're having a hard time with using those additional fields is the reporting piece. Like every report that we run for general ledger reporting, each transaction line is so long because it has a project description and a grant description. It's on multiple lines and our reports seem really messy. And I was just wondering if you have any recommendations.
Well, I mean, I mean, the first question that pops into my head is, I'm not sure I understand why the cost center would be a project and not an additional segment, because that's just out of the ordinary. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, because there are just so many ways to set up a system. But you know, and me personally, like I do like those transaction codes. However, that issue that you just mentioned is something that could, you know, be sometimes of an issue, like depending on what it is that you're trying to track. If it's just a yes or no, those things work great. But if it's kind of like your grant, maybe that's kind of where the problem comes in. Like maybe could we abbreviate some of those names, or maybe, I mean, since it's new, I don't know. I mean, do you have any programs and grant other than the grants? Are you running programs as well, or the programs are in the cost center?
The program, I guess, cost center / program. And the reason that he recommended using project description or project field was because our programs historically have changed frequently. Okay. We don't have like 5 set programs, like correct. Where I worked in the past, you know, we had a department was our third structure, and those were pretty set in stone, whereas our programs historically have come and gone, just depending on what funding we get. So that's why he recommended it, because our chart of accounts would end up with segments where we'd be like constantly inactivating, I guess. I don't know exactly how it would work because we were constantly changing.
I agree. And I agree with that statement too, because yeah, you don't want something that you're going to have to inactivate in that account number, which is those first 3 that we said, because then again, it'll be a mess. I've seen it all messed up, and the project segment, it's easy to inactivate something for you not to see it anymore. So yeah, I mean, so I get it. So that would definitely, I agree with that, you know, with the limited information that I have, that because I see the reasoning behind that. The only thing that I might suggest is, you know, you can rename your your transaction codes maybe to be a little bit shorter, and maybe just use a different format for the name, possibly, so that you can see them better, or maybe just spend more time on the reporting to see if there's a way to expand that, or the
Can
answer might be
you can you change column sizing within reporting on some kind of configuration setup to enable more fields to be on one line?
There is a way for you to expand the columns and the reporting. I'm not sure if that'll do that, but the answer is yes for that. But I'd have to see it to see what specifically you're looking for, to see if that can do that. And I can certainly help you look through that, on another call, and we could do that together. Not a problem.
Okay.
I don't mind. I know. Are you still working with the consultant?
We are off of our implementation phase. I think ended in probably the end of the year, January-ish. We still have some questions we bounce back and forth. And they tried to build reporting for us, but we just kind of have the same issues. We haven't really been able to fix that.
Okay. I'd be glad to hop on a call with you to just look at it, and I'll tell you right there and then if I could see if we could do a screen share and say yay or nay, or give you some suggestions about which way to move forward on that. I'd be glad to do that. Yeah. So after the call, I think there's, you'll see my link. You could just schedule 30 minutes and we'll do that. Not an issue.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, cool. All right. Any other questions? All right. So I'll continue here. So I've got a few minutes here, so I don't want to take up too much time. We might have to finish the budgeting, but I think what I really want to show you all, because what I keep coming across on the budgeting is that people aren't taking advantage of the Excel API. And I know you kept on hearing me say that you don't want to go, I don't want you to have to go into Excel for anything, but there is a tool. And if you, this call is being recorded, so you can follow along once you get the recording. But there is, some of you may not have this admin feature here because it's only for the people who are admins. But I want to just show you, if you don't have this API, and I'll get to it in a minute. If you have this admin, or find someone in your organization who does, if you click on it, there is, what'll happen is, I'm sorry, I clicked on that, but I really wanted to click on Marketplace. But if you don't have admin, you may not have Marketplace, or you may have Marketplace, but you won't be able to turn on this feature. And what I want to show you here is that in this Marketplace, there is an app that connects to your Excel. And I think it's really cool for your budgeting when you need people's input to create a budget, right? So here's the Marketplace. These are all the available tools, if you will, that are called APIs that you can link. There's for Financial Edge NXT. I'll click on this, and I'll just show you that there is, this journal entry batch creator, which we'll do on another session. There's distribution sets, statistical units, tuition management for those of you, Sky API. But really what I want to focus on right now is this budget creator. And if you click on this, there should be a button here that allows you to connect. And if it allows you to connect, go ahead and do so. And if you are the admin, you'll be able to do that easily. And then there might be a few prompts here that to finish off the connection. But you want it to be, like right now I'm connected and I have the ability to disconnect if I wanted to. And so once it's connected, what's really cool is this. I'm going to open up my Excel document. Okay, can you all see Excel? Can you see it? Am I sharing? Thumbs up? Okay. So what I want to show you here is I'm going to open up I'm going to do this again so that you could see it. So what'll happen here is once you open up your Excel, you can go to what's called Insert here, and you can go to Get Add-ins. And if you type in Blackbaud and hit enter, it'll give you those items there. And then I can see the one that I want. This is the budget creator. I can say add, and I'll say continue here. And notice here on the upper right-hand corner, there's a create budget. And I love this because this is, again, for me, I didn't have this particular tool when I was in your shoes, but I think it would be great because I had a lot of people who had input into my budget. And once I click this link, I was already logged in, so it didn't ask me for the sign in. But if this was the first time you were doing that, it would ask you to log in, and you would use your Financial Edge login credentials. And you've got an opportunity to either create a new budget or you can edit an existing budget. And I'm going to click on the edit existing budget. Oh, you know what? Here's my login. It did log me out. Okay, I'm going to log in. If you have multiple databases, it may ask you to choose a database. I'll choose NPAC, authorize. And now what I can do here is I can click on, oh, it's still giving me a problem. Oh no, come on. It's making me look like a liar. It just worked. Oh, yes. Perfect. Okay. So I get to choose the scenario. I get the year that I want and the scenario. And if I say continue, and remember, I hit the button that said edit existing budget. And if I hit continue, what it will do is it'll contact Financial Edge. It'll pull down that budget, put it into an Excel format. And you can see here, here's the account number, the description. I've got the project ID. Again, don't get caught up on the naming, right? Here's your project ID description. If you have a grant, right, this is going to be that transaction code. It would be here if you're doing a grant budget. You got your total and then how it's distributed. And these are all the months, right? You've got, in this case, January, February, March, April, blah, 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 all the way through December. But if you were, of course, fiscal year July, it would start with July. It would read the budget that's associated with your database. And then what's nice is that what I like about this is that now this is in Excel. I could save this as a file. I can send it off to people. I can also, use my Excel skills to split it for different people if I wanted to, and, create different worksheets for people so that I can give them their own budget. They can then go in there, they can update these total amounts. They can update a distribution. They can add account numbers if they want. They can add notes here if they want as to reasons why, they're increasing or decreasing their budget. All this information can be held in this sheet. And then they could send it to you, and or you can give them access to this, but it just depends on who these people are. I'd be weary of that. But the point is that once they send it to you, you have it again in this format, and you've got this opportunity to create this budget. I can just open that budget, make the changes, copy and paste all of the changes, add all the ones that I need to add here if I need to add them, and then just hit submit. And it will automatically go back into Financial Edge, back into all of my reports. All of those things will be, updated automatically based on that particular scenario. Okay, so that just makes it a lot easier. Again, I introduced this to a lot of clients. They don't always know how to use it, but I think it's pretty straightforward. It's easy enough to also update budgets in Financial Edge, but I don't necessarily want to give people access to, to my Financial Edge. I don't want them to do that, even though we can still limit what they do to just budgeting if we wanted to. But the idea is that if we put it in Excel, there's more opportunity for them. More people are familiar with Excel, and it's easy enough to just go down the list, update the account numbers, or maybe even put a note in there so that when you get it as the CFO or director of finance, you can say, oh, this is what that person was talking about, and you can put the correct account number in there. Okay, so that's the tool that is easy enough to do. Those other tools we'll cover on a later webinar, which is the other one that I like is the journal entry import. That is really nice too. So if you have things like ADP, or you're doing journal entries from another system like an AR system that's not in Financial Edge, you could use that feature as well. And Blackbaud is coming up with new APIs constantly. So this is a great way. They've got a great relationship with Microsoft. So as an accountant, for me, that's good. I like that because, there are times that we do need Excel to do certain things that General Ledger shouldn't be able to do or can't do. But we've got an outsourced thing that could also feed into the General Ledger if we needed to. So that it could work sort of like a subsidiary ledger. Okay. And I just wanted to also say, if you're not using that budget, just like I mentioned earlier about having all those different scenarios, I think that's where the power of the budgeting comes in Financial Edge, is because you can have a board approved budget. You can then have a revised for, Q1. You can have a revised Q2. You can have that forecasting budget that you need to have, when it's 3 months into your fiscal year, or 3 months left into your fiscal year, and your board is asking you, how are you going to end up this year? There's a forecasting feature in Financial Edge that allows you to forecast your existing budget that takes into account your actuals that you've spent through that point. So it's a great tool for you to estimate and give a tool. Okay, well, this is how we're going to end up. We're pretty close to what we said we were going to do, or we're way off because of this, and this. So it empowers you with that information at your fingertips. And you have all these scenarios that allow you to just say, okay, well, now if this is going to happen, or if we get that grant, here's another scenario that takes this into account, plus this into account. Now let's talk about, what do we need to do for staffing? Do we need to increase staffing in this department because we want to cover this program? All those things are things that you could look at from a number perspective and say, okay, well, this is possible. I can afford to pay this, or we can't. So we need to find more granting, or we need to raise money. We need to have another event. All those things are things that, can help you think, above and beyond just doing, your financial statements, being that accountant. These tools allow you to kind of take a step further. Okay. We'll spend some more time on budgeting because I feel like we're almost out of time, and I do want to leave some time for questions. So I'll pause right here. I think there's a chat, so I'll just make sure that we get something on. Are you able to include notes? Yes. So sorry, there was just I was reading the questions. Are you able to include budget notes on the budget reports? You mean to print them? Ooh, I have to get back to you on that, because I know I can do a query on them, but I'd be curious. I don't see why not. I just haven't seen anybody actually do them. So who was that? Erica, you're the one that I'm going to actually talk with, right? Where are you? Right, Erica, was that you that said that we're going to talk about your other question? You asked that question about the budget. Okay,
yes,
so I will, before you and I speak, I will have that answer, and I'll show you what it looks like on the budgeting with the notes. So
okay.
Yeah, because it is available, but I'll be honest with you, I love talking about it because I love thinking like, wow, this is what I need, but I'm not a CFO anymore, so I don't use it. And a lot of people have been using like Excel, and I'm really trying to get them to use this, but we'll test that so that you can see what it looks like.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll open it up again to the floor. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or things that you want to see in the future? We can take some notes here so that this could be, again, another working session where we can go over all of your questions. Remember to unmute yourself if you do.
I'll just say I would love to see the forecasting.
Oh, okay, good. Yes.
And budget, or a lot more. We loaded our original budget. We do a revised budget mid-year. Okay. And I don't know how to start that, honestly.
Okay. Very, very, very easy. We could do that on our call.
But I do have the Excel add-in, and that's how I loaded our budget. So I have used that.
Yeah, there are some tools that aren't available in NXT. So you probably are not familiar with it if you're new to FE. It's in the FE7. But I think you said you knew FE7, right? I used
FE where I worked before, and then that was a few years ago, and then we just converted to FE NXT here.
Okay. Yep. I can show you that tool. It's an easy tool that I could take you through 5 minutes to take you how to do that budgeting, that forecasting. Okay. So really easy enough.